What's up, everybody? It's Chris Kunz with the Rich Casino Real Estate Group. On today's episode of Real Estate Simplified, I am joined by another local female business owner, Amy Parker with Appraise It Today. Amy, thank you very much for joining me. I
No
appreciate
problem.
it. So I noticed I was trying to do a little bit of research about you online just to figure out a little bit of your background and history, and you are a steel trap. I couldn't really find anything, so I wanted to start just by tell us a little bit about yourself, about your business, how you got into appraising, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've been in the Sacramento area for over 30 years. Okay. I came here to go to Sac State, and I got a degree in business. Married my high school sweetheart 31 years ago. Have two kids. One's going to the University of Colorado. One works locally. And I'm enjoying being an empty nester and wine tasting these days on my off time. But I ended up becoming an appraiser after leaving the corporate world. Okay. I worked in human resources for, 15 years, and I got tired of it. Decided to take a break from corporate, and I was on vacation for 5 days before I discovered home appraising. A friend of mine asked me to hop in the car with them, see if I wanted to go down to Modesto to keep her company. And I learned that she was a home appraiser, and my business mind started going that, maybe this might be the next career for me. So that was pretty cool. Okay, and that happened 20 years ago.
Okay, so 20 years now. Real quick before we transition, favorite wineries in the Sacramento area?
Oh, I love Macchia down in Lodi.
Okay.
I love MV Wineries up in Fairplay. And it's funny you say that because in 2 weeks I'm headed down to Paso Robles to try out some new wineries. So
very nice. Okay. Are you a red or a white kind of?
I like red, though I did recently pick up some wine at the sugar mill last weekend, and I was favoring white. So We'll see.
Okay, very good. Well, we'll just get right into it then. So you opened shop back in 2004. Is there any one property that stands out as maybe the most interesting property you've appraised, maybe most expensive, anyone that stands out above the rest?
The first home I appraised where I was like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into, was an old ranch house, and it was down in the Galt area, and it was on acreage. It was beautiful, but when I got inside and I was starting to walk around the interior, I heard a buzzing sound. Okay. And I was like, well, this is weird. So I continued to walk through the interior of the home like an appraiser would, and I finally got to the bathroom and bedroom, and the person who was meeting me at the house, she says, oh, I need to warn you, there's a bee nest in the walls.
In the walls.
And it won't come out and bother you, but if you happen to hear a buzzing sound, there's active beehives in the walls.
Interesting.
And I was like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? So I walk into this bedroom, grandma has passed away, nobody's been living in the house, and there's dead bees all over the floor. And you can literally just hear this hum on both sides of the master bathroom. And again, I was like, how on earth am I going to explain this or appraise this house?
That was going to be my next question is how does that affect the value when there's a beehive in the wall?
Well, it's funny because some people who are into honey might think it might add value.
There you go. That's actually a good point.
But no, so that would be the most extremely unusual home that I have appraised in the Sacramento region. On the other realm, I recently appraised a home downtown that was 3 stories, had a 4th story that was a basement, vintage home owned by the Didion family, and, just a beautiful, ornate, craftsman home, and that was quite a pleasure to see this year.
Iconic. That's one of the most iconic properties in the whole downtown
pretty
area.
Cool.
Oh, very nice. Okay. So typically when I work with buyers and I'm explaining the appraisal process, I usually tell them you could get 5 appraisals done on this property and get 5 different values. So first question is, do you believe that to be true? And if so, why?
I do believe that different appraisers bring different levels of expertise to the table. And you talk about different values. Market value is what the most probable price that a home will sell for, with a knowledgeable buyer and seller not acting under duress.
Okay.
Probable, not the most highest, but the most probable. And that's what the banks ask the appraisers to do, is what is the market value based upon this definition.
Okay. So just because we have quite a few first-time home buyers that watch this video series, kind of explain the process of, from beginning to end, how you conduct an appraisal.
Yeah, it's not as easy as Zillow makes it sound. And you know, there's no A in accuracy for what Zillow provides. It's a zestimate of what your home is worth. But a lot of people think that the appraisal process is as easy as just pushing a button, looking at some data, and then you're done. Unfortunately, when somebody gets an appraisal for a home loan, whether you're buying a home or refinancing a home, they'll hire the appraiser to confirm they want to take on that liability. So the bank hires the appraiser for their own agenda, and that is, we need to know the features of the home, and we need to know the features of sales in the area, and we want you to report this to us. So typically the appraisal process will start with somebody ordering the appraisal. And if you're buying a home or doing a refinance and going through a bank, the only person that can hire an appraiser is that entity. You know, you can't call me and say, hey, Amy, can I hire you? They don't like that.
Well, the other thing too is it's completely random who the appraiser selected.
So every bank has their own approved list of appraisers, and some of them delegate hiring the appraiser to what's called an appraisal management company. So when you see that fee for the appraiser, you're paying for that management and the appraiser actually to go out and do the property. And the reason it costs so much to get an appraisal is they ask a lot of information and they require us to report back to the banks on several items. So the first thing the appraiser does is they show up at the house, and we actually have to measure the house.
Okay.
Some people use a tape measure, some use a laser. I would hope most people are using lasers and not tape measures these days. But to a younger audience, it would probably be surprising that we have to measure the house. And the reason we do that is because when a home is built, the drawings are submitted to the planning department, and that is what's used to define how big the home is to the public. Okay. So, I mean, this week alone, I measured 3 homes just because the owner felt the public record was wrong. Somebody had a custom home built. They asked for a 3,800 square foot home to be built, and the county had that the home was 7,800 square feet. Okay. So you can never trust the public records on how big a home is. So that's why the bank has the appraiser measure it. Then the other thing we have to do is the bank wants a picture of every room in the house. Good, bad, ugly. Mm-hmm. Then we have to take pictures of the house on all sides. Okay. And they also want a picture of the street. And the reason they want a picture of the street is to see if there's anything unusual on it.
Interesting. Are we talking like ugly houses across the street?
Well, it could be an ugly house. It could be, if I take a picture on one side of your house, I see homes. But then if I take a picture down the street the other way, maybe I see a train track. Or maybe I see a high-rise commercial building or a water tower. Or, up in the suburbs like in Folsom, you could have on one side of your house these big water tanks.
I've heard of that, yeah.
So they want photos of that. And then that starts the appraisal process. The next thing the bank wants us to do is look at what has sold that's similar. And they require us to drive around the neighborhood and take photos of everything that is similar to put in our report.
Each house you have to drive by and take photos of to either make sure that you went by it or just for informational purposes. Or...
So when we sign off on a report, we sign off saying we drove by all the comparable sales. Okay. So after I do all of that, now I have to go back to my computer and I have to fill out a form that they mandate. Then I have to add aerial photos of the home, the legal plat map, and then every sale I put in the report, I'm supposed to call a real estate agent to confirm the sale.
Wow. So it's a lot more labor intensive than
so we're only halfway through, so I'll stop. But so it takes hours to do an appraisal, and it's not like clicking in a button. And I know, there's a lot of fintech out there now, financial tech, AI, and all of those things, and they haven't quite modernized this feature because the banks really want boots on the ground telling them what a house looks like. Okay.
So I wanted to talk about ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units are growing in popularity, especially here in the Sacramento area with the potential to remove single-family zoning from the neighborhoods in Sacramento. So I wanted to check and see kind of how ADUs add value, what are the best ways to maximize the value in ADUs and things like that.
I ran across a contractor who specializes in just building ADUs. And he did a great job of explaining a few factors to me that I can share to your audience. One is, and I mean, I already knew this, but back in 2020, the governor signed something that basically said, you know, building departments can't stop you from building an ADU. And it defined what an ADU was at the state level, and it required all of the local municipality building departments to expedite the processing of building ADUs.
So you're talking about permitting, things like that?
Permitting, everything. It's like easy, slam dunk. It's got to, if it fits these state rules, we're fine. So what I find these days is two types of accessory dwellings. There's the ones that have been built from 2019 forward, and then there's the ones that were built in the 80s, the 90s, and so forth. So the older accessory dwellings typically have a bathroom, a living area, and a kitchen, and then they have like a wet bar. Oh. So they have a sink, and they have a refrigerator and a countertop. And they purposely don't have anything else because you couldn't get a permit back then for it to have a kitchenette of any sort. As soon as it added a kitchen, it changed its, you know, use and zoning. So we have, so I was at a house in Arden Park this week, and they built one in 1990. And so it's this beautiful 650 square foot guest house in the back, and it doesn't have a kitchen. It just has a living room, a bathroom, and then a large wet bar, you know, beautiful, gorgeous, but no actual appliance.
Okay, is that what that what changes it from
yes.
wet bar to kitchen is appliances? Is that what it is?
So what happens is, you know, in 2020 now it says we have these ADU guidelines now, and it's got to have a kitchenette. It has to have a cooking surface.
I like that. I mean, that works better for folks.
So that works great for
Certainly.
marketability.
Yeah.
I mean, really, do you want grandma coming in your house to cook? No,
well,
you
I
want
do.
her
My grandma makes great food, so yeah, I would. But no, I understand what you're saying.
Mine makes a mess, and it's like a tornado, and then I have to like clean it up. So you know, before 2020, they were like guest house, or it's the pool house, or it's the casita, or
all
the
those
back
fancy
office
names that they have for them.
But the new ones, you know, have a bathroom, they have a cooking surface and all of that. So first you got to understand that part. So if you were to go out today and build an ADU, all it's really got to do is follow guidelines about setbacks, size, and features. So I think in my opinion, if you're going to build one, you want to build one that has at least a cooking surface on it. Okay. It doesn't need to have a full kitchen, but you know, a cooktop or something. And then obviously it's got to have a bathroom. Majority of them are detached. Typically they run in size anywhere from 200 square feet, which might be the size of it's
like a one-car garage.
A one-car garage to like, you know, 600-800 square feet.
And 800, if I'm not mistaken, is close to the maximum amount of square footage you can have in an ADU, correct?
Yeah, and you have to keep it like within 4 to 5 feet of all the fence lines and stuff like that.
Got it.
It's easier to take a garage and make it into an ADU than to, you know, build out. But recently I ran into a home down in Elk Grove where they had put, you know, a 10 by 20 granny unit in their small backyard. City couldn't do anything about it because of the new laws.
And they just got away with it.
Yeah, okay. And typically things like parking come into play, but not anymore.
So when those people build those ADUs, though, they can't necessarily rent them out, right? You need to have special zoning and to be able to rent them out.
No, not always.
Just have, okay.
Not always.
So how does that work? Because past experience, I've heard of that as, you know, bootlegging or something similar, where you have an additional structure that you're renting out, but it's not necessarily classified as a duplex property.
Oh yeah. So that is where we are all coming to learn how fascinating and the different ways you can use these ADUs, because there's nothing in the state guidelines that indicates you can't rent them out.
Interesting.
So I always say check your local guidelines, but they really
attorney.
opened it all up. I mean, literally opened it all up. So how much do they add in value? Please. So the contractor I spoke with said he typically, it's about 120 to 150K to build one.
Okay.
permits, everything. And he said, yeah, the permit process is much easier. And
That
of course,
seems a little bit. So you said 120 to 150K. It seems like it might be. I mean, I've heard of these modular homes or tiny homes that you can bring in for 40 to 60K. But this is if you have just a blank slate in the backyard.
yeah.
You've got to lay the concrete foundation, all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
Got it.
And so everyone's like, well, doesn't it add that much? And the answer is no,
Right.
It doesn't. It's just like if you remodeled your kitchen and spent $100,000, it's not going to add $100,000.
Or the 80 grand you spend, 100 grand you spend to build a pool.
Oh, yeah.
Typically doesn't translate to that same amount of value.
No,
right?
I know. Like 80 grand on a pool right now, that's just an above average pool.
That's
I mean, entry level is like 60K right now.
Crazy.
So what I tell people is when they ask me, well, how much is that going to add in value? It really depends on the neighborhood,
Okay.
the size of the home, and you go from there. So if you have an 800 square foot home that's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and you add, a 200 square foot ADU, it's not going to add as much value to the whole equation as if you have a 3,000 square foot home and a 300 square foot ADU. There seems to be some standard that, the larger the home, the more having that back space makes sense.
Interesting.
And to me, it would seem like, can you imagine you're over in the med center area and you like have 1,000 square foot home and you turn your garage into an ADU and you rent it to a med student? To me, the income alone would derive a higher value.
That's what I was thinking is in the short term, when we're talking about how much value it adds, you can't only think about what it's worth to the property's value, but the rental income that you could potentially be bringing in on a monthly basis.
So here's where the hard thing is as an appraiser, I'm being asked to follow these Fannie Mae lending guidelines to value something. And they believe that the best indication of what something's worth for them to loan on, remember for them to loan on, is what sales have sold for, not what income something has derived.
Interesting.
So there's the little bit of disconnect. And that gets pretty complicated. So basically when I'm appraising a home with an accessory dwelling, I have to look for other sales of homes with accessory dwellings, and I have to compare the price to that home with the accessory dwelling and the home without, and see how much more it sold for.
Interesting.
So, it could be $14,000. It could be $100,000. It really depends.
Okay.
It kind of scales based upon how much the home is selling for.
Got it. Okay, so the real estate market right now, as you know, as most of the people watching this know, is really crazy right now, especially for buyers. And it's so crazy that we're starting to see the market change, not even on an annual basis, but almost on a monthly basis, where
I'm going to say daily.
Oh, exactly.
I'm going to say daily, okay?
It's crazy. So how do you as an appraiser, because when you're looking at comparable sales for a property, you're looking at properties that have sold within the last 6 months. But when market is changing monthly, even daily, how do you take that into account and either add or detract value from a property based on where the market is going?
So we're required to analyze the trend for the neighborhood. And the regional trend is different than the zip code trend and by the neighborhood. So what I'm required to do is when the market is moving in any direction, if it's moving down or if it's moving up, we really want to use the most recent sales. So for example, the home I was at this morning, I really want to use sales from February and March if I can.
Sure.
And then if I have to use older sales, I have to define how much the market's going up. So you can look in the MLS or on other sources and it'll give you a percentage. I go much lower than that. I go by the day. So I take all the data from MLS for the neighborhood, dump it into Excel, and then do a trend line, and it tells me how much it's going up per day.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So recently I was in a neighborhood where the homes were what I would consider entry-level housing, and it was going up $75 a day.
Okay.
But then, I was just in Land Park doing an appraisal for a 2,000 square foot home, and it was going up a couple hundred a day.
So crazy.
And so, banks understand that language. So as long as you justify how you came up with your numbers, they'll believe it.
Okay. Curious how you would compare the market that we're in right now to how the market was in 2005, 2006, when there was a bit of a buyer frenzy during that time.
Well, it's interesting because, wow, you actually have to prove you can afford to buy a house right now.
Go figure.
So that's
right?
important.
What a concept.
Two, there were people putting no money down. People are putting a lot of money down right now. But the big thing we're here, I mean, interest rates in my mind are driving what's going on.
Agreed.
And in 2019, interest rates went from the low threes almost to 4 by the end of the year. And by the end of the year, in that last quarter, we saw prices go up through the spring and summer. And then when interest rates got higher, it just kind of flattened out a little bit, became a little more normalized. Though the normal is not stable. The market's always going up or down. But it's just interesting to see that. So that was in 2019, and then COVID occurs, and this is unprecedented history we're making as far as real estate trends go. Everybody's moving because they're hearing they don't have to go to work anymore. But it's interesting, in the last week or so, you've heard some big companies say, hey, we want our employees to come back. We're missing that group creativity. It's not the same. So I believe migration to the suburbs is causing, us to have less homes on the market. Less homes on the market equals higher prices. But we're also seeing unemployment normalize. I mean, we were, 10%, 13% back in April of last year, and we've been, below 8% since December. Before COVID, we were at 3% unemployment. Last year, companies probably weren't giving very many raises, but they are this year. So wages are going up so people can afford more. But in my mind, we'll see a little bit more stabilization once interest rates go up. And they've gone up in the last 3 weeks.
So in this market, I understand when you're appraising a property, you're looking at comparable sales, you're looking at the condition of the home. I also understand that appraisers will take into account how many offers were placed on a property and kind of the ballpark price of where those offers came in. Question is, how much value do you as an appraiser attribute, and how much weight do you associate with the amount of offers that came in?
So the offers indicate what buyers in the current market are willing to pay for that home. And they each have their own varying degree of financing and down payments and stuff. And it talks about that whole topic I mentioned earlier about probability. So market value is the most probable price. It's not the highest, it's the most probable price. So if you have 15 offers and 10 of them are at 475 and 5 of them are at 500, it kind of says most people thought it was worth 475, but these other people have some other motivation. Maybe they've put in a bunch of offers and they are just completely stressed out. Or maybe they just came into a windfall and they don't care if they pay more, they just want the house. And that isn't really paying market price. That's paying, emotional price. Or I have a friend who says that's auction price.
Oh, okay. Yeah, whatever it takes to win, I suppose, especially in this market.
But again,
right now.
market value, where I'm required to define it, is the most probable price, not the highest. So that's why sometimes the appraised value will be different than what something sells for or is in contract at.
Got it. Okay. I want to transition into a couple personal questions to find out a little bit more about you. So you are heavily involved in a walking club in Sacramento. Did you organize that walking club? Are you the founding member?
No, a friend of mine started this group called Hands Up for Hooters. And yes, they're, those kinds of Hooters.
Sure.
And she was a breast cancer survivor, and she started doing what's called the Susan G. Komen 3-day walk. And every year she'd go down to San Diego, and over 3 days, she'd walk 20 miles.
Herself, every day?
With a group of people who had signed up for this event. And so over the years, she started collecting friends who wanted to walk with her because, especially with COVID, what a great way to keep healthy and sane and so forth. So I ran across her and she was talking to me about it, and I thought she was crazy. And then I remembered my mother-in-law going through breast cancer. And I remember after she finished treatment, she told the family that she was going to do this 3-day walk in San Diego for breast cancer. And it was called the Susan G. Komen. And she didn't really know anybody, but she wanted to do it as a celebration for beating breast cancer. So she went and did it, didn't know anybody, met some people, and it rained all 3 days.
Great.
And she did it. And so, we go forward in time, and here's my friend who's doing the 3-day walk. Here's my mother-in-law who's now hitting her 80th birthday. And I'm like, so, you've had all these types of cancer. You've had breast cancer. You're a survivor. It's your 80th birthday. What should we do? And she said, I've lived a full life. There's nothing, you can give me. And I said, well, what if I walk that 3-day walk in your honor for your birthday? Except instead of going to San Francisco, I'm going to go to San Diego.
Sure.
And hopefully it won't rain. I had this fear. So anyway, that's how it was a tribute to her for her 80th birthday.
Very nice.
And so now, 7 years later, I've done 5 of these walks in November and raised, $25,000 or more towards breast cancer.
Fantastic. Good for you. That's
Yeah.
great.
But yeah, it's a team of us. So we get together and we walk and we train, and it's not fun walking 60 miles in a weekend.
I can't imagine that being the case. Any favorite walking trails in Sacramento?
I love the Quarry Trail up in Auburn.
Okay.
Right now there's lots of wildflowers and it's really quiet. It's about it's a 10-mile round trip hike, and at the end where you turn around, it's right where the Western States 100-mile race comes in to Auburn, and that's an endurance run that people do from Tahoe to Auburn.
Crazy.
I know, not me.
No, thank you. Better than Auburn to Tahoe.
And I'm sure you have some clients that are runners, but I am not a runner.
No, and me neither. No. So I'll stay away from that. Thank you very much for being here. I very much appreciate it. On the way out, I wanted to get your outlook on the 2021 housing market.
2021. Well, it's one digit bigger than 2020.
Certainly.
So I still think we're going up. Can we sustain how much we're going up? I'm not sure.
And like you said, interest rates are going to kind of...
Yeah, 2019 there wasn't much for sale, but prices were a little more stable. But nobody can track the demand from people migrating to new places. People migrating to Placer County because maybe it's a different school situation. People migrating to the foothills, Colfax, Ione, Grass Valley, Nevada City, because they're sick of the city. Who knows if they'll like it once they get there?
True. It's very true. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, if big tech employers say, hey, we want you to show up to work 2 to 3 days a week.
Market changes.
Market can, yeah, absolutely. But it's great chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Last thing, I want to give people a chance to figure out how to get a hold of you, kind of what you offer, what neighborhoods you specialize in, that kind of thing. So please take 30 seconds and plug your business.
Yeah, no worries. So my specialty is valuing residential properties in the greater Sacramento region. I really enjoy working on the older neighborhoods because they have a lot of character. And I specialize in valuing homes for private individuals, and I do work for a few banks, but I do a lot of estate, divorce, private sale appraisals. And these days I seem to be measuring a lot of houses because people don't believe how big their house is. So anyway, it's just kind of interesting. But
how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can reach me on my website at appraiseittoday.com. You can click on Get a Quote for Service and reach out to us that way.
Very nice.
No
Amy
worries.
Parker, I appreciate you being here. Thank you all for being here as well. If you need anything real estate related or appraisal related, give me or Amy a call. Give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email, whatever's easiest. Otherwise, again, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see everybody soon. Stay safe out there.